One way in which I like to understand a piece's composition, arrangement or orchestration more deeply is by visualizing it in different ways, or even creating visualizations. On screen you can see what I call a tabular analysis. This tabular analysis is of the Wrecker's Overture excerpt that I have created for this course. This tabular analysis is the first of two, and it is what I like to call the Orchestrations instrumental stories. In other words, it attempts to outline what all the instruments are doing in each bar and section of the piece, and what roles they are fulfilling within the composition's texture. For example, in the first section, the music is monophonic, meaning all the instruments play the same melody. However, Smyth orchestrates this section in octaves. The tabular analysis highlights this by identifying the octave that each instrument is performing in. The third and particularly the second orchestration are more complex, with instruments fulfilling different and sometimes changing roles across a section. For example, the cello in the B section starts in an accompanying role before doubling the bass line, providing extra reinforcement on that line. The orchestration instrumental stories is a good way of visualizing not only the instrument roles in a section, but how these can change, ultimately transforming and colouring an orchestration much more across a section. In other words, it cuts through the clutter of a score, which is beautifully useful for telling us the pitches and rhythms of the piece, the harmonies and things like that. But sometimes these distract and deter us from understanding what the instruments are actually doing. Briefly outlining some key points for reading this tabular analysis, the left-hand column, as we have touched upon, is the selection of instruments. It's not all the instruments in Ethel Smyth's overture, but all of the instruments that play within the excerpt that we are looking at. For example, later in the overture, or certainly the opera, Smyth uses an English horn, contrabassoon, various percussion and an organ. These do not appear in this excerpt we are focusing on, therefore I felt it best to leave them out. Secondly, to the right of these instrument labels is what these instruments are doing as the piece progresses. Thirdly, to keep track of the instruments and to make referencing the score easier, the top three rows outline some core details. The top row is the section label, which in my score is marked by rehearsal marks, A being A, B, B, and so on. The texture detail is an overall summation of the texture in a section or subsection. This relates to the other tabular analysis, the tabular overview that we'll look at in a moment. And the bar numbers are, well, the bar numbers in reference to the score. Lastly, below the table are a set of keys for each section. I try to maintain consistency of colour where I can throughout the analysis, but these do subtly change from section to section. The intention of the keys is to, I suppose, minimise clutter on the table by providing abbreviations and colours for ease of reading. The other tabular analysis I've created is a tabular overview. A step back, it offers broader details regarding sections, textures and orchestration groupings. Another way of visualising this table represents the piece as if it were progressing horizontally. This form of tabular analysis is actually the one I start with when analysing pieces for orchestration, as it focuses on the broader details, the sections and what they look like in a broader context. The instrumental stories tabular analysis then emerges, I suppose, as a sub-tabular analysis from this, adding specific details regarding orchestration. We will therefore be using this tabular analysis less than the other, the orchestrations instrumental stories. However, I have provided it here to give another perspective and to represent just how we can analyse, understand and represent a piece in different ways. I also provide access and downloadable links too. As you can see, it boasts similarities to the previous tabular analysis, such as the section label, bar number and texture details columns. However, it offers some different ways of looking at the orchestration. For example, this table attempts to break down the number of layers and what each of these layers does and which instruments contribute to each layer. This is reflective of the instrument stories, but more of a collation. The tabular analysis is handy for seeing how instruments are used in an orchestration. While we can see this in the score, I think the tables make this much clearer by removing the distraction of notes and divided parts, which can make the score difficult to annotate, etc, etc. A link to the tables is available in the next lesson, along with a downloadable version of them as a PDF.